the previous discussion, the webinar that we had on 3rd of August this month, we discussed with respect to the key aspects of the project management basis, and then the organizational systems, project team matrices, and project team members, KPIs, and project team member valuations. And today's discussion, we are going to discuss the project planning and project execution plan, project scheduling, budgeting and resource planning, and of course the integrated project schedule and control. And we'll end up discussion with the earned value analysis or earned value management method. And today's discussion, when we say planning, execution, and scheduling and control, I'm going to discuss only with respect to the time and cost, not the entire project management processes, planning or scheduling and control of the entire project management process. I will be concentrating on the time or the schedule and the cost or the financial aspects of the projects. Now, before I move on, if you have any questions, so there will be a question and answer session. So as usual, you note down the slide number and the question, and at the end of the presentation, I think Jayanta will moderate and then ask the questions, and then I'll try my best to answer your questions. Right. So the planning is basically simply, when you put the planning, what's planning is, a very simple explanation is what needs to be done, when, by whom, and at what resource levels to achieve a desired objective. When you consider what needs to be done, what physical work needs to be done, so what sort of a constraints need to be done, what resources need to be identified, so that's what. And then when those work to be done and by whom, that's the planning. So for example, if you go to the planning needs, so you plan the scope of work, obviously, what type of work, what kind of work, activities, work that need to be done. So scope of work, what need to be done, when those need to be done, by whom, whether the project team, what team member need to be done, and what resource level. So that's scope of work, these activities. And if you look at the time, cost, and quality, the triangle that we all know, the time, cost, and quality triangle, and then those aspects again go back. What need to be done, when, what timing, at what time they need to be done, and by whom the time, cost, and quality need to be done, at what resource levels. And if you look at the planning needs of stakeholders, again, we have discussed in length last webinar. At the last webinar, we discussed in length. And again, these stakeholders, project managers, customers, performing organizations, sponsors, and all these stakeholders, when you plan what need to be done with respect to these stakeholders, some stakeholders may be positively affected, some stakeholders may be negatively affected. So identify what needs to be done on these stakeholders, and then when those need to be done and by whom. Maybe one of the project team member, or maybe need to be done by the client, or maybe it need to be done by an independent outside organization. In that case, we need to identify from the project team a resource person. That means by whom. You need to plan the activities of that stakeholder as well. So that's how the planning exercise in very simple term. And when you look at the risk and constraints, now usually we overlook these risk and constraints. When we look at the planning, when we plan the scope of work, we plan the time, cost, and quality, we plan the stakeholders. Sometimes we overlook planning the risk and the constraints. If you take, for example, if you consider a constraint in a very simple planning activity. Planning is not just the project, a big construction project. Planning is your day-to-day activities as well. Say, for example, if you, in your household, you have only one car. So that's a sort of a constraint. So you have to use the car as well as your partner has to use the car. So for example, if you need to go somewhere, now you may have planned everything. Now around at 3 p.m. I need to go to the station, park the car there, take the train and go to the destination. So I have planned everything. Whereas your partner may have to go to a place around 3:15. Now you have a problem. So that's where the constraint is. So don't think that the constraint is your partner. The constraint is actually your car. So now you need to plan in advance how that constraint is accommodated in your plan. So possibly the best strategy would be, if you have planned properly, your partner will come and drop you to the station and then go about doing that partner's work, and then come back and pick up again from the station. If you are a good planner, you would be able to plan your partner that way. So that's what it is. So the constraints are also planned, and that's very important. Sometimes we overlook that sort of planning, and that's in simple words. And once you do the planning, and that plan will be treated or can be considered as the baseline, and then you control and you execute the work against this baseline and control the work against this baseline. So that's the beauty about having a proper plan. Once you get the plan on the paper, on the schedule, and then you use that baseline for the execution and for the control purposes. And as we have discussed last time as well, the plans are, once you plan, after you commence the execution, it goes obsolete because the plans are dynamic. So your baselines also, you will have the original baseline, and then going on continuously, you will be monitoring and executing and controlling the plan. So you will have multiple plans. You have the original baseline, then after a week or two, you will have a new program. And then when you go to the next month, you will be comparing that work against the new baseline, as well as against the original baseline. So the plan and the baselines and the control are iterative process. You compare and contrast and do the control measures. That's what the planning exercise is. So let's go to the next slide. Like this. So we have discussed this last time as well. You plan, set the objectives, survey the resources, form strategy, and then execute, allocate resource and execute, and then control and go back to the plan. So that's the cycle. That is what the plan exercise is. And today we are going to discuss this planning, scheduling and controlling exercise with respect to the time and cost only. Otherwise, as we just discussed, planning is the entire process, everything, not just the time and cost, everything. But we will discuss today only the time and cost aspect of scheduling and control. So once you plan, especially the processes, you document it. So that comes the project execution plan. Usually the plans are documented, and the usual practice is the project execution plan. So in the project execution plan, these are the chapters or the headings. So you explain the scope and objectives, and the project organization plan, the organization charts, work breakdown structures. We'll come back to these work breakdown structures in a minute. And then the project schedule, project budget, project control. These are the essential ingredients, input of a project execution plan. Once you prepare a plan, you document your actions, your control measures, under these headings. So that's the project execution plan. I'm not going to explain in detail, as we know, within a 1 hour, 1.5 hour session, we can't go into deep, in depth. So I'm just explaining, I'm just giving some insight into these headings or the items. So that's project execution plan. And a very simple project execution plan, as you can see here, can be one-page project execution plan. You have the project objective here, scope of work, maybe a half a paragraph, half page, if it is a very simple project. Then the project deliverables, and the costing, expense items, and then the client contact, value added. So this is one simple example of a project execution plan of a simple project, maybe a one page. Or you can have a detailed project execution plan. This is another example here. You can see here the scope of work, project organization schedule, work breakdown structures, manpower plan, budgets, control, accounting. So that there are chapters and chapters. And then you have figures, then you have tables. This is another example of a project execution plan in detail. So if I show you one of the actual project execution plan prepared for a offshore gas plant project. So I will now share that screen with you. Please bear with me just to screen share that with you. Hopefully you can see that. So that's the project execution plan that has been prepared for an offshore gas plant project. You can see, there are volumes, so you can project objectives, project delivery, and the meetings, project controls. So to prepare such a project execution plan, you can't just prepare it. You have to plan it, plan all these aspects, and then document it, because this document, once you document it, is considered as the baseline. For example, if you look at the quality aspect here, it's all documented here, planned and documented here, and that will be considered as the baseline. Controls and everything, measures are written here. So the project management team go through this project execution plan and implement it. Everything is planned and documented here. You just have to go through and implement it. So if I go back to my slides, excuse me for a minute. So I'm going back to my slides. Hopefully you have here, sorry. And if I go and look at another project execution plan, say wind farm project. So let me go and share the screen. So please bear with me for that for a minute. Hopefully you can see it now. So you can see that another example of project execution plan. These are volumes, chapters and chapters. And they are the practical use of project execution plans. A typical big, massive project. So you plan and then document, including all that's not just the time and control. You can see that health and safety and environment, manufacturing, construction. So all the aspects are planned with respect to the execution processes as well as control processes. Everything is documented here. And then the project management team just implement based on these baseline aspects. That is the idea of having a project execution plan. So I'm not going to explain in detail all these, headings, but what I'm saying is that once you plan all these aspects, the project execution plan is the baseline. You document it so that the project management team can go through this step by step and implement it. So let me go back to my presentation screen. So that's the project execution plan. And now, Spark Hub, we have a project execution plan. So if you look at the Annex C of your agreements, you will see that, and this execution plan, actually the format we didn't develop. This format was given to us by ARC. So you can see that the ARC also required us to document our plans with respect to individual projects, how these projects are planned, executed, and controlled. So they have given us these formats. We have just fine-tuned it to suit our projects and documented it. So you can see that the administration organ, so you see the project objectives are documented. I haven't got a example as once done. So these are the sample example formats and backgrounds. And you can see, project milestones, that's a plan. Now in our Spark Hub annexes, we develop 6 months and 12 months milestone plan. And then the project deliverables are there. And
sorry, Gamini, the slides are not, the screen is not seen by us.
Sorry, I need to then go and share the screen. Sorry about that. Share the screen.
Yeah.
Now you can see that. Sorry,
yes.
I go back. So you can see that the execution plan for the Spark Hub, objectives, backgrounds, and then the milestones and the deliverables, budgets, and everything is documented here as planned for the project team to go and execute. This is the baseline for the project team, and then they execute. And even if you look at here, go down here, all the budgets are there, all the control measures are there, including the control measures here. And we have developed a progress control format as well. So that's the execution plan, not exactly the project execution plan that you will be developing for a major big project, but a similar. So you can see that the concepts are there in this annexes as well. So that's, I would consider for Spark Hub projects, the execution plan for your baseline. For your baseline, for you to monitor, control, and then compare the work against the baseline. Now I'll go back to my sharing of the PowerPoint presentation. Now hopefully you can see my screen now. So that's the Spark Hub now execution plan. So next I will go and now discuss the next item of our discussion today, the scheduling, control, and integrated scheduling and control. So with respect to the scheduling, as I have explained earlier, I will be touch base only the time and cost. So we will discuss the scheduling, critical path method, and the budgeting, how we budget and resource a schedule, and then the control aspects. Again, only the time and cost today, this discussion. And then we'll consider the scheduling measures, the control measures, and then the integrated schedule and control. Integrated schedule of time and cost control based on two aspects, S-curve and earned value. That's the idea of today's discussion. First, a typical schedule. And we all are familiar with these sort of schedules. Now, one axis you have the work, the other axis you have the time. So this is a typical bar chart. And it's actually a pictorial presentation of a plan of work to be done. It's just a simple bar chart. So sometimes we confuse planning with this schedule. So sometimes when people will say that this is planning. No, this is not planning. This is a pictorial presentation of a planned time or schedule. So the planning is the entire process, planning from the phase to phase, phases, and then the stakeholders, the process. That's the planning. The schedule is actually with respect to the time or the cost, put down into a pictorial presentation and then represent the plan on a paper. That's the difference between the planning and the scheduling. So this is a typical schedule. So when you want to prepare such a schedule, and then this will be treated as the baseline for you to monitor, and then the control, compare and contrast, and see whether you are ahead of the schedule or behind the schedule, what sort of activities need to be done. So that's the baseline. So for you to prepare a very good schedule, there are aspects, very important key aspects to be considered. So there are, and we discussed about the baseline, so that's the baseline. And the timing of tasks and activities, very important. If you go here, say for example, this activity drainage areas map, here we have considered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks, or maybe 5 days. So that's, we have to analyze and identify. So the timing of, identify the task and the timing of task, not only the durations, but when those activities can be commenced and when those activities can be finished. So they are the important aspects, timing of tasks and activities, and then the constraints, as we have explained earlier. So if you, for example, if it is a construction site, and you might have one tower crane. So one tower crane lifts the, it will be used to lift the resources and help the construction activities. So that tower crane can be considered as a constraint, a resource constraint. So you have to move around, work around in that sense. So that need to be incorporated into the schedule. If you look at a schedule like this, so these activities need to be moved around with respect to that constraint. So that's the other requirement, when you look at the scheduling. And then the milestones, you have to identify who is responsible for what milestones. And the next important aspect is the link between task activities. So if you go here, so can we commence this task before finishing this task? Or can we commence this task before commencing this task? So that's the link between activities. So these are very important requirements when you develop a schedule, when you develop a program like that. And then, of course, the very important aspect of the schedule is the critical path method. That's the method we always use, we normally use to prepare schedules, and then the monitor and control. I don't have time. I'm not going to explain in detail what's critical path method, how you implement the critical path method. In a nutshell, in a simple word, critical path methods is applied where when you look at a project, the project can have multiple parts. For example, if you consider, let's say, a wind farm project, you will have at site, the site clearing, foundations, and then the construction of the piers, like that. Whereas while in the factory, you manufacture and fabricate the columns of the wind turbine. And then, so there's a process going in the factory, process going in the site. There are parallel work. Whereas there may be some activities going on overseas. Say wind turbines and the wind blades may be imported from overseas. And so some activities, some works are going on overseas. And those works then have to be transported, shipped, and then shipped, and then shifted, transited to the sites, and may be stored and to the site. So you can see the multiple parts going on this project. And when you put them into a schedule like this, and one path may be the longer path than the other paths. Say, for example, site work in such a way that, so you may finish all your foundation work, but your factory work may be still going on because that's the longer path. Or maybe the overseas work may be the longer path. So that the critical path would be then the overseas set of activities. So in that case, the critical path is defined as critical path is the sequence of project network activities that take the longest time to accomplish. That means the longest path, the sequence of activities, but that determines the shortest possible time to complete. You will not be able to finish before that because that path has still going on. Whereas the site, you may have finished the work and work, sitting there while the columns are delivered to the site. So that's what the critical path method is. Any delay to the activity in the critical path will delay the project. Say, for example, this example, assume that the critical path is the factory, manufacturing and fabrication of the columns. And site work, if there's a delay to the foundation work, the concrete work or the site clearing, it will not delay the work because you will have a float. We call it float. You will have enough time to recover until such time the columns are delivered to the site. However, if the critical path is to the factory work, if there's a problem in the factory due to some resource problem or maybe due to other aspects, then that will delay the project. So that's why the critical path is very important, because any delay to the critical path will delay to the project. So that is very essential consideration when you prepare schedules. Not only that, in my case, in my view, not only we need to look at and concentrate on the critical paths, you have to identify and concentrate on the near critical activities, because what do we say near critical activities is mean that part of the set of the activities may be just 5 days off the critical path. So if you delay that path by 5 days, that path will become the critical, overtaking the previous critical path. So you need to concentrate. So when you prepare schedules like this, you need to consider all these aspects, critical paths, near critical activities, and prepare the schedule and put that down as the baseline project, and then concentrate on the project, monitor and control. And there's another theory or the system that is called program evaluation and review technique. We are not going to discuss that today. Or PERT. In that technique, you consider the durations as not discrete or one value. You consider the uncertainty built into the duration. So without having a one duration for these activities, you give 3 durations: most likely duration, optimistic duration, and pessimistic duration, and combine all 3 and get a 1 duration. That's called the PERT, and I'm not going to discuss in detail. So that's another consideration when you do the schedules. As you can appreciate, I can't explain everything in detail, so I'm going to just touch base the important aspects. So the next important aspect is the work breakdown structures. When you look at the schedule, so you divide the work into major groups, and major groups into the work packages, work packages into the activities, and then when you develop a schedule, so it's a sort of a cascading, or sometimes you call it a tree diagram. So you group them in the work breakdown structure basis. And the idea is to get the full project divided into work groups and then divide the work groups into packages, and then the packages into milestones or the activities for the better control. That's the idea of doing it. So they are typical work breakdown structures based on the work phases, or maybe based on the functions of the project. So you can have the work breakdown structures like that. And the work breakdown structures, once you define properly, can be used to codify and classify the task. So if you, for example, if you say here, the whole project, you give zeros, and then the main divisions, the work groups, 100, 200, 300, and then the structure below, major assemblies out of 200, then 200 to 250, 300 goes to 300, like that. And then this 240, again, you divide. So that's the work breakdown structures, cascading tree diagram. If you look at an example, I'll show you an example here. Sorry. Example here. Let me share the screen. Give me a minute, please. Share the screen. Hopefully you can see the screen. So you can see that the work breakdown structure for a big, massive project. So you can see the components, project management with the cost coding and all these in heading basis. So you have project management here, site costs here, and then under site cost project management, mechanical, supervision, electrical, and then the travel, and you go down, you can design, so it's a cascading. So once you define the work breakdown structures properly that way, then you can have the cost centers or milestones for the control, monitoring and control purposes. That is the idea of having a work breakdown structure. And let me go back to my PowerPoint presentation. Hopefully you can see it. Yeah. And so that's how the importance or the application of work breakdown structure for the scheduling. And the next, so this is a typical program or the schedule that has been developed using Primavera programming software using a work breakdown structures. You can see that once you do that, you can combine them and collect them. There are layouts in the Primavera software. There are filters. So you can use the layouts and the filters to look at the progress of the work or the financial progress of the work, cost centers basis or the work basis, and then compare and contrast and monitor and control. So it's very important to classify, identify, and then code and document the work breakdown structures at the very beginning. And then the next aspect is the resource planning. So once you put down the schedule, the activity basis using the work breakdown structures, then you assign the resources for each task. Say if it is a construction activity, if it is a foundation work, so how many excavators are needed, how many laborers are needed, so you resource it. So that is called the resource planning. When you do the resource planning and you do assign the resources based on the critical path, as we have discussed previously, if you delay the critical activity, you are going to delay the work. So therefore, when you allocate resources, the carpenters and then the plumbers, the electricians, the priority would be allocate first to the critical parts, and then the closest critical part, near critical parts, because otherwise if you delay them, you are going to delay the project. And then you prepare the resource graphs, aggregate the resources and prepare the resource graphs and check, after you do the resourcing, allocating the resourcing, do the resource graphs and check the aggregate resources versus the resource availability at the site or the resource availability at your fingertips. then you might see that, hang on, at this time, based on our resource allocation, we needed 15 electricians at the site, but actually you have only 5. Then you do resource leveling. So you can use the programming software, either my MS Project or Primavera, do the resource leveling. When you do the resource leveling, you do the resource optimization based on the critical path. So you can't delay the critical path. So you keep the critical path with the resources and delay the other activities so that the 15 electricians can be divided between the activities. That is the idea. I'm not going to explain again in detail. These are the important considerations when you do the scheduling and the resource management. So, for example, if you look at this example here, I'll explain here. Let me share the screen. Give me a minute, please. I'll share the screen. Hopefully you can see the screen. So this is using MS Project. And so you can see the based on the work breakdown structures, the activities have been allocated and defined, and here you can see that the resources have been incorporated, boilers, welders, technical assistants, those have been allocated. And if you go and look at here, and bear with me please, we'll show the resource graph. So if you look at the chemical equipment, now you can see the resources. So electricians, so allocated blue, over allocated, so you can clearly see it's over allocated. Now comes the resource leveling and resource moving or resource optimization. And if you go and look at, for example, filters, again, over allocated. So you do the resource leveling and resource optimization once you do the scheduling and resource allocation. So that's the idea of doing this. So let me now please go and share my PowerPoint. Okay, we are back to the PowerPoint presentation. And then the budgets. The next topic that we are going to discuss is the budget. So once for you to do the resource allocation, resource planning, and you need to calculate the costs. So I must confess here, budgets, calculation cost is a big module. It's massive. Yeah, we can't discuss everything in here. I will explain only the very important headings, aspects. So when you want to prepare budgets, you prepare budgets by first calculate the direct cost, material, labor, subcontractor, then assign the direct cost into the tasks, and then calculate the overheads. During the last webinar also we discussed the overheads aspect. So if I go back to that overhead chart, please bear with me. I'll share the screen. Okay, let me share the screen of so you can see that these are the overhead cost items. So indirect cost, company overheads, and then one method is to calculate overheads in one multiplier here that we discussed last time. The other method would be to calculate staff separately using this multiplier, and then the indirect costs or the site overheads and the company overheads separately, and then calculate the direct cost plus the indirect cost when you calculate the budgets. If I go back to my PowerPoint presentation here, so when you prepare the budgets, you calculate the direct cost, material, labor, subcontractor, and then add the overhead cost into that separately using a multiplier or using the headings. That's because the direct costs are directly attributable to that task. If you do the task, that cost will link. Overheads is actually over and above, and you can divide the overheads into two components. Project overheads or the site overheads if you take the project, then those site overheads or the indirect cost will incur. But that indirect costs are spread among the different multiple tasks. So you can put them in a multiplier on top of the direct cost. So the company overheads are actually, it occurs irrespective of you take the project or not, company overheads are there. The company rent, company managers, the directors, the insurance, so they are there. You have to recover a simple component of that cost from your project. So how do you do it? You divide the company overhead costs among your projects using the turnover, not just divide by 5. So if you have 5 projects, you don't just divide the company overheads by 5 and put that cost 1/5 of the cost to this project. No, that's not the way. Because that project may be $50,000, whereas you might have a project with $200,000. So you prorata the company overheads and put that cost into the on top of the direct cost, and then the project overheads. They are the project staff, site overheads, and then a fraction of the company. So that's how your budgets are prepared. And then on top of that, you add your profit and the risk. That's how the budgets are prepared. I'm not going to explain everything here because we don't have time to explain in detail. So that's the crux or the basic of preparation of the budget. And there are simple examples of the budgets. So this is that activity-based budget. So you can see the activities and the budgeted allocation. And these are the budget based on the resource groups. So you can either have activity-based, or you can have resource group-based, or you can have a combined version. If I go and show you, excuse me, I will share this screen with you, then you can see. Now you can see it. So if you can remember the previous schedule that we showed, we discussed, the mechanical works, using the work breakdown structures, you can see now the budget has been allocated using the cost centers. So say for example, the 65,000 for the mechanical works is built up of piping and chemical, and piping is built up of boilermaker. So it's a cascading effect using the work breakdown structures, work groups, and then the work packages, and then the activities. And you can filter and collect and then compare and control. That's the idea of having a complete budget. You have a schedule and then you have a budget. So once you do that, using the cost centers and the cost codes, you can do the control measures. That's the idea. And let me go back to my presentation. Bear with me. Yeah, so that's the idea of budgets. And your task, your Spark Hub has schedules. So schedule B is you actually budget for the project. And from that schedule B, you will have annexure C's budgets. And the schedule B's are grouped and collated in one big master budget with the hub management. So the hub management has big financial schedule, a budget with cost codes, cost centers. One of the cost centers, if you go with the cost cascading effect, the universities, and then the projects, and then the sub-projects. So the budgets are prepared that way, and in that sub-projects, you will have costs with the PhD students, research students, research assistants, and then the travel like that. So that's the idea of having this budgetary control. So we have prepared the budgets for Spark Hub in that way. So when you look at control measures, the control is, so if you look at, say for example, so that's the plan, say that's your schedule plan, and then you monitor, you plot the actual, and then the actual goes that way. So this is actually project monitoring, planned versus actual, not the control. Control means, if you look at here, the whole cycle. That's the control. Planning, execute, and control means the whole process. Otherwise, if you look at here, if you stay here, it's actually project monitoring. So we'll discuss what the control measures means then. So the control measures are time and the progress control, cost control, and the integrated schedule and cost control. So I will go one by one under these headings. So if you look at here, this is one classic example of one of the projects that I've seen, saying that this is the progress control. So if you look at here, this is the time based, that is the plan, the blue line, that is the actual. So for me, this is progress monitoring. There's no control measure. If you look at this example, another example of a project, the plan, financial plan, the budget, and the actual. So this is the financial progress control, they say. But for me, it's actually monitoring. There's no control action there. The control action would be a project like this. If you look at here, the blue line is actually the budget or the baseline, the schedule. The green, the purple line is actual process. So once you plot the actual, now you monitor, and you can see that here, hang on, we are lagging behind. We have to do something. Remember the control, the action, the repeat process. And the green graph here is the control measure. We try to come back and get back to the program. So this is the original program or the schedule. Purple is the actual or the monitoring. The green is the revised after the control measures. So the green line is the controlled, measured plan. So that's the control activity. But of course, in this project, you can see that after even implementing the control measures and the control plan is included, it's still behind. It's still there. That's because for me, I must say that, say, look at here, I think when they commenced the control measures, about 8 months gone. So the rot is taken place. The damage has been already done. You might try to get back using a different plan, a revised plan, but the damage has been already done. So you might not be able to. So that's why the control measures need to be done early in the program, early in the schedule. You should not wait until, for example, 8 months gone, or because the damage has been already done then. So when you do the control measures, you need to do it early in the process. So if you look at the Spark Hub example again, the progress control measure. Let me share the screen here, please. Bear with me. So this is the Spark Hub, the progress control measure that we have introduced. Anticipated progress, actual progress, and then the comments on any issues and methodology to recover. That's the idea. You compare actual versus plan and note down how we are going to recover the progress. So we introduced this progress control measures into the Spark Hub. Hopefully our chief investigators, PhD students, LCIs will prepare these progress control charts and do the control measures. Now I understand that you are doing this in 6 months intervals. So when I introduced, when we discussed that at that time, we thought that maybe we'll do this once a month, at least once in 2 months. But I understand that you are doing this 6 months interval. But please look at this way. If you do 6 month intervals, if your project is 2 years, you will be doing only 3 reports, 6th, 12th, and 18th, because 24 is the last one. So you will be considering only 3 progress control measures in your project. Maybe it's enough, maybe not. Maybe after the first one, you might think that, hang on, after the first progress control report, we'll do every 2 months. You need to look at that way. Otherwise, you can't. It's no point of doing progress monitoring. It's the idea of doing the progress control. Come back to the program. Okay, so let's go back to our presentation. So the financial control we tried to implement to the Spark Hub, a method using the cost indicators, the budgets. Let me now, I think I have a problem here. Please bear with me. I think I didn't, excuse me for the moment. I know what happened here. Okay. Now let me go and share the screen with you. Hopefully you can see the screen now. So this is the work breakdown structures and the cost codes we attempted to introduce the Spark Hub, using the year and then the project and then the sub-projects. And if you look at the example journal entries, now these are example numbers only, not the actual numbers. So you can see that, if you do a proper cost coding, so go back and look at, project 18.2. So like that, you can compare and construct. So for the Spark Hub management to do that, the number should be, reported back to them using the progress control charts. So actual numbers are here. Say for example here in July quarter, if you want to go and look at what's happening in the hub management, I have now these are actuals. Of course, I have deleted the actual numbers and the actual descriptions, and you can then compare and control. And if you look at either behind the numbers or head of the numbers, you can go and do the control measures. And in the Monash, this has been implemented using the financial control measures using the SAP. I think the Monash financial division using SAP. So cost coding and the SAP we have tried to integrate together. I'll come back to my slides here. Sorry, let me, I think I have lost my slides. Sorry, let me share the slide. Hopefully you can see now the slides. Let me go back and share my slide. Excuse me. I think this is the slide. Okay. Going back to the, sorry about this. Excuse me. Okay, we are here. Sorry about that, because I think my Excel spreadsheet got stuck. That was the problem. All right, now we are here now. So how you now, if you look at here, we explain about progress monitoring here. And how do you look at the control measures is here. One method is using the S-curve. So we call it S-curve because if you plot the cost in percentage basis against the time percentage basis, it comes as a S-curve. That's because the cost of a project is usually a bell curve. Cost at the beginning is less, then cost is escalated, and then at the end it goes down. So usually it is a bell curve. So when you put a percentage wise, you get a normally an S-curve. So you plot the budget percentage basis, and then you monitor actual cost. At a given time, if you look at this point, now you might see that, yeah, the budget cost was this, actual cost is this. Now that means we have saved. Is there a cost saving? We might think that, we have saved it. Now hang on. It may be actually you are supposed to do the work here, but actually you are doing here. So your actual cost you should have incurred here, but you incurred there. So there may be a delay. That may be the case. Rather than we are saying a cost saving, the actual case may be a delay or maybe any combination. So if you compare the budget versus actual like this, you don't get the correct picture. The correct picture to be observed, you need to draw the earned value curve as well. That is we call the earned value method. Where, so this black curve is the earlier the budget curve. The red curve is the actual cost curve. The blue is the earned value. That means the cost of the work, not the actual cost, as planned, the work that was planned to do. That is the earned value. At a given time, the budget cost is at that time what was the budgeted cost. But you may not have finished the budgeted cost. You may have finished only about 50% of that or 75% of that. And then what is the cost of that work? That is the earned value. So you plot that. So that is the blue line. So when you plot that curve, you can see that the budget cost was this, right? But you have earned only this. That means you earn this value, the value that you should have finished here, you earned there. That is the delay there. And you have earned that value here, but you actually spent this red line. So that means you have made a saving. So this is the schedule, the cost variance. This is the delay, or this is the schedule variance. That is called the schedule variance. So earned value minus the budget cost is the schedule variance. Earned value minus the actual cost is the cost variance. That is the earned value analysis method or earned value method, simple terms. And when you look at the technique, the explanations, the definitions, they are the definitions. Earned value analysis. If you go to this slide, cost variance is the earned value less actual cost. Schedule variance is the earned value less the planned value. And in reality, this is what the bottom line. That's the schedule variance. Earned value less the budget. So you are behind. So if the earned value minus the cost, budget cost is minus, then you are behind the schedule. You are delayed. If it is plus, you are ahead of the schedule. The earned value minus actual cost, if it is plus, you are better than the budget. If the earned value minus the actual cost is minus, you are under budget. That means you have overspent. That is the concept of the earned value system. So these are the equations. So as I said earlier, although these equations are there in the earned value management, this is the integrated schedule and control. You can see that the time and the cost both are integrated here. Using one set of data, you are reporting the schedule variance or the time as well as the cost variance or the budget. So that is the integrated schedule and cost control. So I'm using the earned value management. I'm not going to explain in detail here, but in reality, these equations are explained here quite easily. If you can understand this graph, if you can look at this graph, grasp this aspect, then that is this set of equations. Earned value or the schedule variation is the earned value minus planned value. Cost variance is the earned value minus actual cost. And then the schedule performance index is based on the percentage basis. If the percentage, if the value is more than 1, you are ahead of the schedule. If the value is less than 1, you are behind. That's the idea. So if you look at this example here, so you can hear in this example, so the overall, the schedule variance is minus, overall cost variance is plus. So that means overall we are behind the schedule. We are delayed. Overall we are more, better than the budget. Our cost is less than what we have budgeted for. So we are good. So budget wise we are good, but time wise we are bad. And if you have done a based on very good cost coding system or the work breakdown structures, you can go up and see where we have gone wrong. So you can see that actually, where we have gone wrong in this data collection. Not only we are behind the schedule, we are overspending as well. That's where we need to go and do the control measures. Come back to it. So that is the control measures. So the integrated scheduling and control aspects like earned value management, own value analysis, these parameters, once you do that, maybe weekly, maybe fortnightly, or at least monthly, when you do that, you get these numbers, and then based on these numbers, you go back with the cascading effect, you go to the problem, you go and see where the problem is. Now in this case, that's a big problem. Now in this topographic study, we are behind the schedule. That means there's something wrong with respect to the work. But cost-wise, we are doing better. So we are not spending much, but we are behind. So that's the idea of integrated schedule and control. So go back to this concept. You might think that, oh, hang on, this is too much to me. This is over my head. Very complicated analysis. No, very simple. I must say that. If you look at this graph, coming back to this, if you can understand this graph, grasp this, then you can understand these equations, this method. The problem would be actually not the understanding the concept, not the theory behind the concept. The problem would be the implementation. That's because it's not easy. I mean, we can talk about the scheduling, cost budgeting, controlling. They are the theoretical aspects. Once you try to implement it, is the problem. About the challenges are, to go back to, so the work breakdown structures, how to get the proper work breakdown structures. Too much detail is too much. Too less detail, then you don't have a control. So you have to strike a balance. And then the detail or the data coming from the sites or coming from the people, how reliable they are. Or are they trained to give you the data? And are they trained to capture this data and the cost control? So they are the problems. The problems are the implementation, the challenges. But that's what I'm saying. If you wait until 8 months, 10 months to implement the controlling process, the boat's gone, the damage done. You can't do the corrective measures. So that's why you need to implement these control measures or the integrated schedule control aspects right at the very beginning. Start from the very beginning. Then you can actually look at the problem, look at the issues, and put down the control measures to the issues as well. That is the idea. So at the end, finally, so once you do these processes, the project manager's ultimate goal should be to finish the project on time and cost to the required specification with these constraints, the stakeholders, socio-economic aspects within this circle. That's what we normally say. Project manager should finish the project time, cost, and quality. But we know that in reality, the projects rarely will be finished on time to the cost. So therefore, for me, project managers should go beyond this. They should finalize commercial negotiations and close out. The idea is the beauty or the management capability of the project manager should be, even though the project is over costed, overspent, or over time, or step maybe 3 months delayed, even that, everybody should be say that it's a successful project. That is the ability, the management ability of the project manager. That's what we say: financial, commercial negotiations and close out, and marketable project outcome. Whether the project is on time or not, 3 months delayed, or 500,000 overspent, but everybody, the stakeholders, all the project members, even the client and your boss, everybody say that that's a successful project. That is the idea of a project manager. And then that's when you can get the repeat client. The clients will come back. The client will not grumble 3 months delayed or 100,000 overspent, because for them, you are marketing saying that that's the best we did. If we didn't do the project control measures, if we didn't do the project management properly, this would have gone 6 months delayed. This would have gone 500,000 overspent. So this is the best outcome. That is the marketability of your project. And that's how you need to get the repeat client. So for you to do that, you can't just present it without facts, without data. That's why we have to have the schedules. We should have the control measures. We should have the integrated schedule controls, and we need to do those control measures regularly and often. And the clients are involved in these control measures. They are in the process. They are available. If the project is going to go out of shape, time-wise, cost-wise, at the end, right at the very beginning, after third or fourth month, you will understand it, and the client is aware. The client is educated to get the project in that sense. That is why we have this very important aspect of scheduling, controlling, and integrated schedule and control. Very important aspect. So with that, I've finished my presentation. Thank you very much for the listening of my presentation. Now, hopefully I have given you something to think about it. I confess, it's not everything. I can't do everything, in 1.5 hours sort of time. But I assume that I have given some, thinking processes for you to go and think about and develop your management skills, broaden your management skills in this sense. Thank you. So I'll let Jayantha to now go and handle the Q&A answers session.
Thank you very much, Gamini, for your excellent presentation. I'm Jayantha Kodikara, Director of the Spark Hub. Good afternoon. Questions are slowly coming in. There's one question here. Are there any standards or guidelines, local or international, for preparing project execution plan for different types of projects? And also are there any specific software to undertake earned value analysis?
Right. So question one, it's a very good question. So if you look at the project execution plan, I will now try to get that slide. So can you see my screen? Maybe, right? So that's the project execution plan, topics, headings. So normally they are the essentials. So there are no sort of a standard, sort of a, aspects. So the very good reference material is the, as I have explained last webinar as well, the Project Management Body of Knowledge, PMBOK, published by the Project Management Institute. That book gives you the headings and the items that need to be going into a project execution plan. And then there's sample examples that I have given you. You can use them as, if it is a simple project, one-page document. If there are big projects, and all the aspects of the project management processes. The idea is, once you plan it, the processes, sit back and see whether everything is there for my project management team to execute it. Consider that this has the baseline, and then they execute that plan, and then do the control measures and compare and contrast. That is the idea. So once you do that, then that will serve the purpose. So I hope that explains the project execution plan question. And with respect to the earned value analysis or earned value management, there are so many software available for example, enterprise resource management. So if you look at the enterprise resource management software such as SAP or even the Primavera software, you will be able to do the variance analysis. However, the problem would be, as I explained earlier, the problem would be not the analysis, not the management. The problem would be to set up it. Set up the data and then train your project management team to include or input the data in a way so that you can use it. So the other, in our case, in industries like us, because we are used to have schedule separately and bill of quantities in a different document. So we have, for time, we have a schedule or program. And then for the cost, we have bill of quantities. So we document the time in one set and the cost in another arrangement. So we have two aspects. Whereas if you want to do a integrated scheduler and cost control using earned value management system, it should be a single combined effort. So your scheduled task should be costed and priced. So the task in the schedule should be priced and costed. So therefore, then you can actually insert and feed one set of data into a system where you can calculate the schedule variance and the cost variance. So that is the idea. So our problem would be the implementation challenge. The software, you will have SAP or Primavera, or even using spreadsheets, you would be able to do it. Right. So I hope that gives an answer to that question.
Thank you, Gamini. There's another question here. Could you please brief the key relationship between project budgeting and work breakdown structure?
Very good question. So work breakdown structures, as I have explained earlier, maybe if I can go and So when you look at the work breakdown structures, so as I explained earlier, the project, you divide the project into work groups, and then from work groups to work packages. And the work packages, you divide that into tasks or milestones. So, and that can be done maybe based on the locations, say site, office, head office, off-site, factory. And then from the site, then you might do maybe the phase basis, the design basis, construction basis, or maybe function basis, electrical, plumbing, or so like that. So based on your requirement, how you are going to go and measure and control, based on that you divide your work breakdown structures in that way. Or you can have a combination of the work breakdown structure, a matrix implementation of the work breakdown structures using everything included into the headings. And then this work breakdown structure, when the cascading effect, these can be considered as the cost centers. And these activities and the work groups are costed. So when you do the budgeting, when you prepare the budgeting, so those budgets are prepared based on these work breakdown structures and the cost centers. That's what I said earlier. We have a problem in our industry, where in the construction industry, when you have a work breakdown structure and the schedule in one way, and the bill of quantities in another way, then you have a problem. Of course, then your costing is based on the bill of quantity headings, whereas your scheduling is based on the work breakdown structures. So you need to incorporate these costing components of the bill of quantities into the work breakdown structure costing. So it's a task, implementation challenge. Once you do that, when you implement it, then you can have the work breakdown structures and the budgeting into the same system. Very difficult, I must admit, I confess that, especially in the construction industry. The implementation of the integration is difficult, but can be done with the right thinking, right measures, right control measures at the very beginning. Hope that helps.
Thank you, Gamini, for that detailed answer for that complex question. Many of our participants are still in early stage of their career. Some scholars undertaking PhD projects. Of course, how can they use these techniques in their projects as a platform for them to plan for large projects in future? Can you give some advice, because they might be thinking we are not doing a large projects at this stage. So how can I use this information?
Very good question, right? I mean, can you see my screen? Is it shared?
Yes.
Okay, so prepare a schedule like this for your project. Say a PhD, say your project may be, let's say our Queensland University Chaminda's project, with the help of your lead chief investigator, with the help of chief investigator. At the moment, your appendix C has only milestones. Use the top-down approach to get these milestones. Each milestone, how you are going to achieve that milestone. Using the work breakdown structures, go from top to down, prepare a simple chart, simple schedule like this with the activities, and allocate the resources, including the in-kind contributions of your part investigators. So where the part investigators input comes in, where's the chief investigator input come in, including the in-kind, plus the cash involvement. Prepare a simple chart and then monitor it. Do the progress control monthly basis. I know that you might say that research projects are big projects, so you don't have activities monthly basis. I'm not aware about that. Try to do a sort of a sub-basic, for example, your data collection process, your literature survey. You might have literature survey from local literature survey, foreign literature survey, data collection, lab work. Put those activities in. Prepare a simple chart and monitor it. and then do the progress control and especially the control measures. You won't find that, you know, your part investigators input is not coming in. Your lead chief investigator or chief investigator input is not coming in, and you have a visual representation to show that to your LCI. That's what my approach, you know, start from a simple activity like that. And I can confess that I can understand you won't be able to do the, you know, earned value management method for your project, because, you know, it's a complex process. But by the time you finish your project, once you do this, you would be very good at project controls.
Thank you very much, Gamini, for that advice for our younger researchers. I think it has been a very valuable two-series webinar on project management. And we thank Gamini very much for his in-kind support given to Spark Hub to run these two webinars. And as you know, we have these webinars uploaded in our Spark Hub YouTube channel. So you can see it again in those channels. I understand views have increased quite significantly over the last several weeks of the past webinars. So with that, again, thanking Gamini, I would like to close the webinar series. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me here. It's a pleasure to come and contribute in some way. Hopefully the audience, the viewers got something out of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.